Hi, this is Veronica with Sew It Seams, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be looking at the block I-6, also called Viewer's Choice, from the Dear Jane Quilt book. When we take a look at this block, it is difficult to see because the block that Jane made was out of a dark fabric. But when we look at the line drawing that Brenda, the author of this book, did, it is correct in that Jane made seams right along the middle of this block. I'm not exactly sure why. She may have just had little pieces and couldn't do a larger block, or she was starting one way and then changed. Who knows? But I do want to try to replicate the way Jane did her original block. It would be simple if you want to do something easy just to cut out this template and piece one large piece. But I'm going to do a pieced center just like that. The fabric that I'm going to be using today for my main fabric is this fun pink fabric. It has a little bit of blue, but it is overall pink. And then, of course, for my background will be my muslin fabric. So let's walk through how I'm actually going to make this block. What I'm going to do is first create a 4-patch out of my main fabric. And I'm just going to sew pieces that are large enough so that I can create a template over top of them. In order to create these little squares here, I first want to cut 4 squares out of my main fabric to be at least 2 inches. That gives me enough room for the seam allowance and for the edges coming all the way to the end here. And then I'm going to cut out a template of this overall piece in the center and of these little melon shapes. Now the template that I'm going to cut out, I am going to cut from freezer paper so that I can iron my fabric around the freezer paper and it gives a little bit crisper of an edge. So I'll show you that step when we get there. First, let's cut out 4 squares of 2 inches or more of the focus fabric. I have 4 squares of my focus fabric cut. Now, one thing I could do is just stitch these squares together and be done. But I noticed that my fabric is actually a directional print. All my little blues are going in one direction, my pinks are going in another. Since this particular pattern is just sewing these 4 together, I wanted it to show up just a little bit more. So I am actually going to turn the opposite corners and stitch them together. It's subtle, but it'll be enough to show some variation in that center section, so it gives a little bit more of an interest, I think. So I'm going to draw my 1/4 inch seam allowances and just stitch all 4 of these together. My center squares are now all sewn together and I've pressed it, and you can see that there's just a little bit of an interest there with the design shifting just slightly from block to block. Now we're going to work on the center template. And I use freezer paper for this. Let's see. Freezer paper is found in the grocery section of the store, and it's paper on one side and then a waxy film on the other side. What's nice about freezer paper is you can press this waxy side onto fabric and then it peels right off without leaving any kind of residue, and it can be used a few times actually. And this paper side you can draw on. It's thin enough that I can hold this over my design and trace because I can see the image right through there. So I'm going to press this freezer paper template onto the back of my fabric. To line it up, each of these inner indentations need to line up with the seam. Now it's hard to see on mine because I've stitched with a blending thread, but I'm lining up here and here, and then need to shift just a little. It's lined up there, and it's lined up there where that seam is. So I have my waxy side down, the shiny waxy side is down, and paper side is up, and I just need to get my iron and press it over. And now that template is on there. I'm now going to trim a little less than 1/4 of an inch all the way around so that I can then fold these over and press. I've trimmed all the excess around here, but make sure that you clip right in the corners here where we indent. That way your fabric can actually fold over. If you don't clip that, they won't fold. So I'm just going to come around to each indentation and clip. Okay, those are all clipped. And now I'm going to press this over. My iron gets pretty hot, so I am going to use a stiletto to hold the fabric down, especially on some of these bulky sections. But just go around the entire pattern and press down these little seams here. I've got all my edges pressed, and it doesn't have to be really flat. What I'm doing is creating that straight edge so that I have a line to follow when I'm doing applique. Now with freezer paper, I can just peel that right off, and it doesn't leave any residue at all. And this is ready to applique on. Now I'm going to prepare the background fabric that I'm going to be appliquing that little shape onto. I've taken my muslin fabric and I've cut it larger than what I need for the square. The square will end up being 5 inches, so I cut this to 5.5 inches, so I have a little bit extra room around for being able to trim it down. To find the center and to line up my block, I've taken my fabric and I just folded this background fabric in quarters and just lightly finger pressed it. I don't need to have a big crease on there. So I have my lines coming across, and that's where I can line up my seams from my little star shape here. So I'm lining up my seams right around there, and I'm going to pin this down. It's all pinned. I'm going to stitch all around the edges here, and then we'll come back and talk about the rest of the block. This center little star is now stitched on and pressed down, and the last sections that we need to do are these little orange peel shapes that go into each of these corners. So we're going to do the same method of using the freezer paper template. I have my template for the little orange peel. On the wrong side of my fabric, I'm going to place the waxy side of my template down onto the fabric, and I just press that down. It doesn't need a long press because it sticks pretty quickly. And then I'm going to trim around. Now that I've trimmed my fabric around my template, I'm going to press the seam over. And I just do it little bits by little bits. Now I can remove my freezer paper, and I will stitch this in the corner of my block. One tip I've heard for trying to do little points like this, where it's coming to a point and there's more fabric then there is point to hide behind, is to taper that edge, just taper that point. So I'm not trimming off a lot, but I'm trimming off just enough so then I can get that tucked underneath. I'm going to start with my point right in the corner there. It's a little fiddly right at the beginning, but I've got the point pinned down, and then I can start stitching around. I have all 4 corner orange peels sections pinned down. It looks a bit like a Frankenstein mess right now, but I'm finding that for today I'm struggling a little bit with just stitching. I don't know if my hands are just tired or I'm tired, but I'm finding it a little bit easier just to pin it all down, and then I will actually be doing some good stitching with my needle churn applique. But because it's all stitched down like this, it keeps it from shifting. When you're doing this block, you want these little orange peels to not just match into that point, but also having this point line up with the corner of your block. So for each of these, I have the point here and then this point especially lined up here. So I've done that in all 4 corners, and so that will make sure that my block doesn't start getting skewed in just those little corner sections. All right, I'm going to now stitch all of these down. All 4 of the orange peel pieces have been stitched down, and I pressed the block really well and then trimmed it. It was pretty simple, just it's a matter of getting all these applique shapes pretty accurate if you can, and stitching them down. Well, I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough of making this next block in the Dear Jane quilt, block I-6, also called Viewer's Choice. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below or send me an email at soitseemscreations@outlook.com. If you like this kind of video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. You can also click that notification bell and subscribe, and you'll be notified each time that I upload a video, which is every Monday. This is Veronica Johnson with Sew It Seems, and I'll see you next time.